I was just a construction worker sitting in the bleachers. Nobody paid him any attention. Then a 16-year-old girl stopped breathing. And the man nobody noticed moved through that panicked crowd like he'd been trained for exactly this moment. Because he had. What happened in that gym in 11 seconds changed 4 lives permanently. And the quiet man who walked through those doors carrying a thermos of cold coffee and his 7-year-old son's hand would spend the next several months wishing he had simply looked away. He hadn't. He never could. If this story already has you leaning forward, you're exactly where we want you. Subscribe to our channel and follow every part of this story to the end, because what comes next is even more devastating, more unexpected, and more human than anything you've seen today. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling us the city and country where you're watching from. We want to see just how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The Tuesday evening that changed everything started, as most ordinary disasters do, without any warning at all. Cole Vardell arrived at the Ridgecrest Middle School gym 17 minutes late because Jamie had lost one of his sneakers, not both, just the left one, which was somehow worse. And they'd spent 10 frantic minutes tearing apart the back seat of Cole's truck before finding it wedged underneath the passenger seat in a way that defied simple geometry. By the time Cole signed the permission slip at the entrance table, showed his ID to the volunteer with the laminator badge, and steered Jamie through the noise and bodies toward the bleachers, the JV game was already into the second quarter. "Can we get nachos?" Jamie asked. "We just ate." "That was an hour ago." "That was 40 minutes ago." Jamie considered this with the gravity of someone disputing a serious factual error. "I'm a growing person." Cole almost smiled. He found 2 seats near the top of the bleachers, away from the main cluster of parents and their oversized foam fingers, and sat down with his thermos of coffee, which had gone cold somewhere around mile 3 of the drive over, and settled in to watch the game he privately found a little boring, but attended every home contest because Jamie had developed a fierce, unexplained loyalty to the Ridgecrest Falcons, despite not attending Ridgecrest, not knowing any of the players, and not being able to reliably explain the rules of basketball. It was just one of those things. The gym was the way school gyms always are on game nights. Too warm, too loud, smelling of rubber flooring and popcorn, and somebody's overheated jacket left too long near the heating unit. The bleachers on the home side were packed. The student section occupied the lower rows, loud and restless, kids filming each other instead of the game, parents farther up talking over the squeaking of sneakers below. Cole scanned the room automatically. It was a habit he'd worked hard to suppress over the years and had never fully managed. Exits. 4. 3 standard doors and the wide double door near the concession table where they'd come in. Crowd density heaviest at center court level. A cluster of maybe 15-20 kids near the far corner of the student section who weren't watching the game at all. They were watching something happening among themselves. Cole looked at the game. He looked back at that corner. He couldn't see what was happening clearly. Bodies were in the way. But the energy over there was wrong. Not the excited wrong of a crowd reacting to something funny, but the tight, predatory wrong of people forming a ring around something they wanted to see. He told himself it was nothing, teenagers being teenagers. He poured cold coffee into the thermos cap and watched the Falcons miss a free throw. Jamie said something about wanting nachos again. "Give it 10 minutes, Cole said. Hailey Wexler had been trying to make herself invisible for approximately 2 years, and she was reasonably good at it by now. She had learned which routes through school were safest at which times, which bathrooms to avoid during lunch, which seat in the library put the most shelving between her and the main door. She knew how to walk with her head angled just so, not so low that it read as obvious weakness, not so direct that it invited challenge. She'd learned it by trial and error, which meant she'd made some costly errors before she got it right. She hadn't told her mother any of this, partly because her mother was busy. Her mother was always busy. Brianna Wexler ran a technology company with 4,000 employees and a market valuation that got mentioned in business publications. Cole Vardell would never read. She was the kind of person who responded to important emails at midnight and rescheduled personal dinners without seeming to notice she was doing it. Hailey loved her mother the way you love a person who is genuinely trying and still somehow perpetually not there, a particular kind of love that contains equal parts tenderness and exhaustion. And partly, if Hailey was being honest, she hadn't told her mother because she was ashamed. as if getting relentlessly targeted by Preston Vale and his particular circle of friends was something that reflected poorly on her rather than on them. She knew that wasn't rational. She knew it anyway. Preston Vale was 16, the same as Hailey, but he carried himself with the settled confidence of someone who had never once been told that he could not do something and had it stick. His father owned a significant portion of the commercial real estate that housed half the businesses in the school district, sat on the school board as an unofficial advisor, and had successfully had a guidance counselor reassigned following a complaint about Preston that had gotten too close to formal documentation. Hailey knew about that last part because the guidance counselor had been one of the few adults she'd ever felt comfortable talking to. The counselor was gone now, replaced by someone who did not appear to find Hailey particularly interesting. Tonight, Hailey had come to the game because her friend Dara had basically dragged her, and because she'd been inside the apartment for so many consecutive evenings that even the cafeteria noise of a basketball game had started to seem like a reasonable trade. She regretted that decision approximately 90 seconds after she lost track of Dara in the crowd near the concession stand and turned to find Preston Vale 3 feet away, surrounded by 4 of his friends, looking at her with the particular expression he used when there was an audience. "Hailey." He said her name the way someone says the name of a thing they've decided belongs to them. "I didn't know you liked basketball." "I was just leaving," she said. "You just got here." "I forgot something." "What did you forget?" She tried to move around him. One of his friends shifted to fill the gap. Not aggressive, not grabbing, just blocking, the way you'd move a piece of furniture into a doorway. A technique that was impossible to call out without sounding hysterical. "I just want to leave," Hailey said, and she hated that her voice came out smaller than she intended. "You're so weird," Preston said, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. "Why are you always so weird? I'm literally just talking to you." She looked for Dara. Dara was not visible. She looked for an adult. The nearest adults were deep in conversation about something unrelated, not watching. She reached into her jacket pocket and found her phone and pressed the button for her mother's contact. It rang. She got voicemail. The particular hollow click of a call going unanswered that she knew, in some practiced way, to expect. "Hi, you've reached Brianna Wexler. Leave a message, and..." She ended the call. Preston had watched her do this. He tilted his head slightly. Something in his expression shifted, not into anger exactly, but into something colder and less casual, the performance dropping away. "Who were you calling?" "Nobody." "You were calling your mom." He said it with a kind of pity that made her skin go cold. "She's not coming." "Leave me alone, Preston." "I'm not doing anything." He spread his hands, a gesture for the watching students. "See? Nothing." "You're so dramatic. You know that's why nobody likes you, right? You make everything into this whole thing." The watching kids were quiet in that particular way of people who sense something real happening and have already decided they won't intervene. Hailey tried to push past him. Preston reached out and caught her by the arm. Not a violent grip, not yet, just a restraining one, fingers closing around her forearm in the particular way that communicated ownership without technically requiring an explanation. And she turned back and looked at him and saw in his face that he had decided tonight was going to be different from the other nights. "Let go," she said. "We're just talking. Let go of me." His grip tightened, and then his arm moved, in what probably looked to the watching kids like a kind of rough, almost playful capture, up and around her from behind, crossing her throat. Not a full chokehold, but not nothing either. Her chin went up reflexively, and she felt her airway partially compress, and she put her hands on his arm and tried to pull it away and couldn't. "Preston," one of his friends said, uncertain. "Relax," Preston said. He was almost laughing. It wasn't a vicious laugh. That was the thing about Preston. He never did anything that felt, in the moment, like something anyone could point to and say that was the moment. He occupied a space just inside the edge of what could be explained away. "She's fine. She's totally fine." Hailey's vision blurred slightly at the edges. She was not fine. Cole saw it from the top of the bleachers and was moving before he had consciously decided to move. This was the thing he had spent years trying to explain to himself and had never quite managed. The moment his body recognized a threat to someone vulnerable, something in him simply went ahead and started responding, and his rational mind arrived at the party a half-second later, already committed. He'd done a lot of therapy around it. The therapist had told him this was a feature rather than a flaw, which he didn't entirely believe but had stopped arguing about. "Stay here," he told Jamie. "Don't move." "Dad, right here. Don't move." He left the thermos on the bench. He came down the bleacher steps at a pace that wasn't quite running. Not yet. Because running would create chaos before he could assess. An assessment was still possible. He could see the group now. 6 kids, one girl whose breathing was clearly compromised, a boy with his arm across her throat who seemed to think this was funny. Cole had seen this before, in conditions considerably more serious than a school gymnasium, and the sick familiarity of it settled over him like something cold. He moved through the edge of the watching crowd. A few kids saw his face and stepped back without knowing why. He stopped 2 feet from Preston Vale. "Let her go," Cole said. His voice was quiet. The gym was loud enough that most people couldn't hear it, but Preston heard it, and the 2 kids closest to Cole heard it, and something in the register of it made the almost laughter on Preston's face go still. Preston looked at him. "Who are you?" "Let her go right now." "This is none of your—" Cole moved. He didn't strike Preston. He didn't hurt him. What he did was precise and fast, and deeply anticlimactic to watch. If you didn't know what you were looking at, one hand went to Preston's wrist, the other to his elbow, and Cole rotated his own body into the space between them in a movement that leveraged physics rather than force. And Preston's arm came away from Hailey's throat as naturally as a door opening. And Preston found himself redirected, not thrown, not slammed, just firmly repositioned, a step and a half to the right, with Cole's left hand placed flat against his chest, holding him there. Hailey gasped and put both hands to her throat. The whole thing had taken perhaps 4 seconds. Preston stared at Cole with an expression that was, for the first time, something Hailey had never seen on his face before. Uncertainty. "Back up," Cole told the others without taking his eyes off Preston. They backed up. "You okay?" he asked Hailey, still watching Preston. She managed to say she was. "Someone go find a teacher or an administrator," Cole said. "Right now. Not in a minute. Right now." 2 kids immediately moved to do it. The rest stood there looking at Cole with the particular suspended attention of people watching something they don't have the vocabulary for yet. Preston said, very quietly, "Do you know who my father is?" "No," Cole said. "You should find out." "Probably," Cole agreed. He kept his hand on Preston's chest. Not pressing. Just there. The way you'd keep a hand on a gate you weren't sure was latched. "Right now I'm more concerned with making sure she's all right." Hailey was shaking. Her hands were still at her throat. She looked at Cole, this man she had never seen before, in a flannel shirt with a paint smear on the left sleeve and tired eyes, and a thermos-shaped dent in his jacket pocket. And she didn't have words for what she felt, which was something considerably more complicated than gratitude. A teacher arrived. Then another. Then the assistant principal, breathing hard from moving quickly in dress shoes. Cole released Preston's chest. He stepped back. He identified himself, answered the assistant principal's questions in short, factual sentences, gave his phone number when asked. He did not mention anything about his past. He was very careful not to mention anything about his past. By the time the situation had been sorted into the hands of the school administration, Preston separated, parents called, statements being taken. Cole made his way back up to the bleachers where Jamie was sitting exactly where he'd been told to sit, small and still and watching with very large eyes. "Is that girl okay?" Jamie asked. "She's going to be." "What did you do to that boy?" Cole sat down. He picked up his thermos. The coffee was still cold. "I moved him out of the way." "How?" "Geometry," Cole said. Jamie looked at him for a long moment in the way 7-year-olds look at adults when they sense they're being given a partial answer. Then he settled back against Cole's arm and watched the second half of a basketball game neither of them would remember. And Cole sat there in the warmth and noise of the gym and felt, very quietly, the specific weight of having done something he could not undo. He hadn't wanted to be seen. He had been seen anyway. Whatever came next would come regardless of whether he was ready for it. He drank his cold coffee and watched the Falcons lose by 6. The video was 43 seconds long. Someone in the student section had started filming when the crowd began to shift. One of those instinctive phone raises that teenagers do before they've fully processed what they're watching. And by the time Cole had Preston's arm clear of Hailey's throat, the camera had captured all of it. The redirected grip. The pivot. the flat hand on Preston's chest, holding him in place with what looked, to anyone watching, like almost no effort at all. Cole's face stayed level throughout. Not angry, not frightened, just resolved, in a way that was somehow more unsettling to watch than fury would have been. The kid who filmed it posted it that same night, around 11, with a caption that said simply, "Construction worker at Ridgecrest game tonight." Whatever he used to do, it wasn't construction. By morning, it had 400,000 views. By the time Cole dropped Jamie at school the next day and drove to his job site on Clement Street, it had crossed 1 million. He found out about it the way he found out about most things, too late, and from someone else. His foreman, a heavy-set man named Dwight, who communicated primarily through grunts and clipboard gestures, met him at the trailer door with his phone held out and an expression Cole couldn't immediately read. "You want to tell me what this is?" Cole watched 12 seconds of the video. He handed the phone back. "It's exactly what it looks like." "And what does it look like?" "It looks like I moved a kid away from a girl he was choking." Dwight watched the rest of the video. He watched it again. He set the phone face down on the folding table and looked at Cole with the particular attention of someone recalibrating. "Where'd you learn to do that?" It wasn't a question, quite. Cole picked up the site schedule from the table and looked at it without reading it. "Long time ago?" "Long time ago where?" "Dwight, I'm asking." "I know you are." Cole set the schedule down. "Let's talk about the Clement Street pour. We're behind on the foundation inspection, and if we don't get that cleared by Thursday..." "Cole." Dwight's voice had something in it that stopped him, not a warning, something closer to worry. "There are 2 news vans parked outside the main gate." Cole was quiet for a moment. "How long?" "They were there when I pulled in at 6:30. Cole looked at the window. Through the gap in the trailer blinds, he could see the chain-link fence at the street, and beyond it, yes, the white flank of a broadcast van with a satellite array folded flat on its roof. A woman in a blue blazer standing near it, talking to someone off camera. He felt something shift in his chest that he recognized as the specific discomfort of a life he had carefully constructed beginning to develop cracks. "I'll handle it," he said. "How?" "By not talking to them." Dwight made a sound that expressed considerable skepticism about this strategy, picked up his clipboard, and went back out to the site. Cole stood in the trailer and looked at the van through the blinds and thought about Jamie, who was at school right now, sitting in his second-grade classroom learning long addition, who did not yet know that his father's face was on the internet 1,000,000 times. He pulled out his phone and called the school. He asked them to hold Jamie inside after dismissal and not release him to anyone except Cole himself. The secretary said she understood. He didn't explain why. He went to work. Brianna Wexler learned about the video the same way she learned about most things involving her daughter, from a secondary source, after the moment had already passed. Her assistant, Marcus, brought it to her at 8:15 in the morning during the 15-minute gap between her infrastructure call and her board prep session, setting his phone on the conference table in front of her with the quiet efficiency of someone delivering news they know won't be received well. "You'll want to see this before it gets brought up in your 11 o'clock, he said. She watched the video. She watched it twice. Then she said, "When was this?" "Last night, around 8. Hailey had been home by 9:30. Brianna had been in her study on a call with the Singapore office. She remembered hearing Hailey come in, had lifted a hand through the study doorway in a gesture that was meant to convey, "I see you, give me 10 minutes," and Hailey had gone to her room without stopping. Brianna had finished the call at 10:40 and looked in on Hailey and found her apparently asleep, and had gone back to her desk to handle 3 more emails before finally sleeping herself. She set Marcus's phone on the table. "She called me," Brianna said. Marcus waited. She called me and I didn't pick up." She could see it now in her call log, which she had not checked until this moment. Hailey cell, 7:52 p.m., missed. She had been in the executive session. Her phone had been face down on the table in front of 6 other people. She had seen the screen light up and registered that it was Hailey, and thought, "I'll call her back in 20 minutes. She's fine. She knows where I am." She had not called back in 20 minutes. She had called back at 11:16 after Hailey was asleep and left a voicemail that said, "Hey, sweetheart, saw I missed you. Call me in the morning. Love you," in the distracted voice of someone managing multiple things at once. In the video, Hailey's hands were at her throat. Brianna sat with that for a moment that stretched considerably longer than it should have in the middle of a workday. Cancel the 11 o'clock, she said. The board prep, reschedule it, and find out who this man is, the one in the video. His name's already in the comments, Cole Vardell. He's a construction supervisor, local company, lives about 4 miles from the school. No criminal record, no public social media presence. Find me a phone number. I can try. He doesn't seem to. Marcus. She looked at him directly. Find me a phone number. He found her a phone number. She did not call it immediately because Hailey called first at 8:40, which was unusual because Hailey had a first period that started at 8:20 and almost never called during school hours. Brianna answered on the first ring, which was also unusual, and which Hailey noticed because there was a pause before she spoke. Mom. I'm here. I saw the video. Are you? Brianna stopped herself from asking, "Are you okay?" because she could already tell from Hailey's voice that the answer was complicated and that the question itself was somehow beside the point. Where are you right now? In the counselor's office. They wanted to call you directly, but I asked to call you myself. Okay. Brianna kept her voice even. I'm listening. What Hailey told her took about 6 minutes. She told it flatly, without drama, in the particular voice of someone who has rehearsed emotional distance as a survival strategy and now deployed it even when they didn't need to. She explained Preston. She explained the pattern of it. Not last night, but all of it. The 2 years of it. The routes she'd memorized through the school. The guidance counselor who'd been reassigned. The calls she hadn't made to her mother because she'd known the calls wouldn't be answered. Brianna listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. When Hailey finished, there was a silence that had weight to it. Why didn't you tell me? Brianna said, and it came out less like a question and more like something she was asking herself. Mom, I need you to answer that. Hailey was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with the careful honesty of someone who has thought about this for a long time, because I didn't think it would change anything. You'd have been worried and busy at the same time, and that's harder to be around than just busy. Brianna didn't say anything. I'm not trying to be mean, Hailey said. I'm just telling you. I know, Brianna said. I know you are. She told Hailey she was coming to the school. Hailey said she didn't need to. She was fine. She had class. Brianna said she was coming anyway. There was a pause, and then Hailey said okay in a voice that contained beneath its resignation something that sounded like relief. Brianna picked up her coat and her bag and told Marcus to hold everything, and drove to Ridgecrest Middle School in the kind of focused silence that people who are used to managing large crises sometimes fall into when the crisis becomes personal. She drove fast. She made one wrong turn. She didn't notice the wrong turn for 3 blocks and had to double back. She was not, at this moment, running at her best. Cole made it through most of the morning before the first call from a reporter reached his cell phone, which meant someone had either gotten it from the public business registration or called his company's main line and been redirected, neither possibility being particularly comforting. He let it go to voicemail. The reporter left a message identifying herself as being from a national news outlet and describing the story as one about a heroic bystander and asking for Cole's perspective. He deleted the message. The second call came 40 minutes later. Different number, different outlet, same essential request. He deleted that one too. The third call was from a number he didn't recognize that turned out, when he listened to the voicemail, to be an attorney named Gerard Finch, representing the Vale family, who wanted to make Cole aware that they were exploring legal options regarding the incident and that Mr. Vardell should retain his own counsel before making any public statements. Cole listened to that one 3 times. Then he called his own lawyer, a woman named Patricia Oakes, who handled his occasional contract disputes and had once helped him navigate a workers' comp claim, and left her a message asking her to call him back as soon as possible. He went back to the foundation inspection. He managed 40 minutes of actual work before Dwight came to find him with a look on his face that had moved past worry into something more concrete. The crews are getting calls, Dwight said. Media's asking the guys questions at the gate. Tell them no comment. I already did, but Cole, the Branford contract called this morning. Cole stopped. Branford was the largest commercial project on their current roster. 3 months of work, good margin, the kind of job that kept a mid-sized construction crew employed through a slow season. And? They want to discuss the contract. Cole and Dwight looked at each other. They want to discuss it, or they want to end it. The project manager used the phrase reputational adjacency. Dwight said it like a man repeating words in a foreign language he didn't speak. Said they need to evaluate whether the current media situation creates complications for their stakeholder relationships. They're pulling out. They haven't said that yet. But they will. Dwight didn't answer, which was its own answer. Cole stood on the foundation of a building that wasn't finished yet and looked at the clouded sky and thought about the mortgage on the house and Jamie's school and the 3 other crews who depended on this contract for their hours. And he felt the specific anger of a man watching something he built carefully, being dismantled by people who had never built anything. He didn't show any of it on his face. "Set up the meeting with Branford," he said. "I'll talk to them directly." "You sure that's—" "Set it up." Brianna found the school's assistant principal, a careful man named Hargrove, who appeared to be managing roughly 4 crises simultaneously, and sat in his office with Hailey for an hour while he walked them through the school's formal response. Preston Vale had been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing, a report had been filed, the district's legal team was involved. He said all the appropriate things in the careful cadences of a man reading from an internal protocol document, and Brianna listened and asked 3 questions that were sharper than he expected. And by the end of the meeting, Hargrove was looking at her with the expression of someone who has revised their initial assessment of a situation. "I want to understand," Brianna said before she stood to leave, "how many previous complaints were filed regarding Preston Vale?" Hargrove shifted in his chair. "I'm not in a position to discuss other students. I'm not asking about other students. I'm asking about the complaint history regarding Preston Vale's conduct." "That's a different question." "Ms. Wexler, I have a daughter who learned which bathrooms were safe and which weren't, who memorized the least trafficked hallways, who stopped going to her guidance counselor because that counselor was reassigned after documenting a complaint about a specific student." Brianna kept her voice level. It was the same voice she used in board meetings when someone was presenting numbers she didn't believe. "I'm trying to understand how that happened in a supervised school environment." Hargrove looked at his desk. He said he would have to refer her to the district's legal department. Brianna said she would be in touch with them directly. She took Hailey to lunch after that. Not a planned lunch, not a restaurant she'd chosen in advance, just the diner 2 blocks from the school that had a laminated menu and a server who refilled coffee without being asked. They sat in a booth, and Hailey ordered a grilled cheese and Brianna ordered a salad she didn't particularly want, and for a while neither of them said anything important. Then Hailey said, "What's going to happen to that man, the one who helped me?" "I don't know yet. I'm going to find out." People online are saying terrible things about him. Brianna had seen some of them. The Vale family's narrative had moved fast, faster than Cole's silence, which was its own kind of answer to a media cycle that required feeding. The story being promoted in certain outlets was one of an unknown man with a violent background who had attacked a teenage boy at a school event. Some reports had already surfaced fragments of Cole's military history. Not accurate fragments, not complete ones, but enough to stoke a particular kind of fear that attached to men with combat training existing in civilian spaces. "They're wrong," Hailey said. "He wasn't violent. He was the opposite of violent. He was the calmest person in that gym." "I know. Someone needs to say that." Brianna looked at her daughter, at the fading mark on her throat that she hadn't noticed at first because Hailey had worn a high collar to school, which she now understood had been intentional, and felt the particular shame of a person who has been looking in the wrong direction for a long time. "Someone will," she said. She called Cole Vardell that afternoon. He almost didn't answer. Unknown number, middle of a workday, and he'd already screened 9 calls that had turned out to be reporters, or once, memorably, a podcast host who wanted to discuss the video in the context of civilian vigilantism. But something made him look at the number longer than usual. It wasn't a New York or Los Angeles area code, it was local, and he picked up. "Cole Vardell." "Mr. Vardell, my name is Brianna Wexler. My daughter is Hailey." There was a pause while Cole absorbed this. He'd stepped away from the site to take the call, standing near the equipment shed where it was quiet enough to hear. "Is she all right?" he said. "She's... yes. Better than last night." A brief hesitation. "I wanted to call and thank you directly. What you did for her? You don't need to thank me." "I understand that's how you feel, but I'm going to anyway." Her voice was composed, but not in the way of someone who wasn't feeling anything. in the way of someone who had learned to function through feeling things. Cole recognized it. He'd learned the same skill in different circumstances. I've been watching what's happening with the media coverage, with the Vale family's response. I've seen it. Are you working with an attorney? I've got one. She's a contract lawyer. He stopped. It's outside her usual lane. I have access to a legal team that handles exactly this kind of situation: media liability, defamation, narrative management. They're very good. She said it without the particular salesmanship that he'd been braced for, just a factual description of a resource. I'd like to offer that to you. No conditions, no strings. Cole looked at the chain-link fence at the end of the lot where, even now, he could see the satellite van still parked. A different one than this morning. They were rotating. Why? He said. Because my daughter called me while that boy had his arm around her throat and I didn't pick up, Brianna said. And the least I can do is make sure the man who answered that moment isn't destroyed for it. Cole was quiet for a moment. I don't want to be managed, he said. I don't want a story manufactured. Whatever gets said publicly about what happened has to be accurate. That's all I want too. And I'm not going to perform being a veteran for sympathy. That's not... He stopped again. And that's not something I'm willing to do. I'm not asking you to. Another silence, longer than the first. Cole said, "How's her throat?" The question seemed to catch Brianna slightly off guard, a half-second before she answered. Sore. She's taking ibuprofen. The school nurse looked at it and said there's no real injury. Good, he exhaled. Okay. Okay meaning I'll meet with your lawyers. Not commit to anything, just meet. That's all I'm asking. They arranged to meet 2 days later at Brianna's company's downtown offices. Neutral ground, she said, which Cole found slightly ironic given that it was her building, but he didn't say so. He went back to the site and finished the foundation inspection and drove to Jamie's school at 3:15 to pick him up and stood at the side entrance with 4 other parents and waited. Jamie came out in a line of second graders and found Cole immediately with the unerring radar that small children have for their parents in crowds, and walked to him in the slightly deliberate way he'd been walking lately, more careful, somehow, than his usual loose-limbed 7-year-old gait. Cole crouched down to his level. How was school? Fine. Jamie was quiet for a moment. His backpack had a dinosaur on it that was missing one button eye. Tyler Marsh said his mom told him you beat up a kid. Cole felt something tighten in his chest. What did you say? I said that wasn't true. A pause. It's not true, right? No, it's not true. So what did you do? Cole looked at his son, at the single-eyed dinosaur and the scuffed sneakers and the serious face that looked so much like someone Cole no longer let himself think about for too long. I helped a girl who needed help, the way you'd help anyone who needed it. Jamie thought about this. But you did something special, like a special way. I moved a kid out of the way, that's all. Tyler said his mom said you were dangerous. Tyler's mom doesn't know me. I told him that too. Jamie hiked his backpack up on his shoulders. His voice had that particular careful tone of a child navigating something they don't fully understand but can feel the edges of. Are people going to keep saying that? Cole stood up. He put his hand on the back of Jamie's head the way he had since Jamie was an infant, palm flat, just resting there, a gesture that meant nothing specific and everything general. Maybe for a while. And then it'll stop? And then it'll stop. He didn't know if that was true. He said it anyway. Jamie nodded like he had heard something he needed to hear, and Cole steered him toward the truck, and they drove home in the late afternoon light with the radio on low, and Jamie narrating something about a disagreement at lunch, about whether a shark could beat a gorilla, which Cole engaged with more seriously than the question perhaps warranted, and by the time they reached their street it almost felt like a regular day. Almost. That evening, after dinner, Cole sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and read the news coverage. He read all of it. The pieces calling him a hero, the pieces calling him a liability, the thread on a parent forum where someone had posted his home address and been told by the moderator to take it down, but not before 30 people had already seen it. He read the statement released by the Vale family's PR firm, which described their son as a victim of an unprovoked physical assault by an adult male and called for law enforcement to investigate. He read that Preston's father had given an interview to a local television station in which he said, with practiced sorrow, that he feared for the safety of young people when strangers with unknown backgrounds were permitted to intervene in youth settings. Cole closed the laptop. He sat in his kitchen in the quiet house and thought about the choices a person makes, and which ones follow you and which ones you can outrun. He'd believed, or tried to believe, that the life he'd built here was solid enough to absorb most things. A modest house, good work, a son who still believed that the world was fundamentally navigable if you paid attention. He hadn't asked for any of this. He'd sat in the bleachers at a basketball game because Jamie liked the Falcons and he liked cold coffee, and neither of them had anywhere better to be on a Tuesday night. And now his name was attached to a story that was being written by people who didn't know him in a direction he couldn't fully control. He wasn't angry, exactly. He'd been in situations with considerably higher stakes and had learned that anger, past a certain temperature, became more expensive than useful. But he was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the physical work of the day. He got up and checked on Jamie, who was asleep with one arm thrown over the edge of the mattress and his mouth slightly open, and Cole stood in the doorway for a moment looking at him. 7 years old, already navigating what Tyler Marsh's mother said about his father, already carrying something he shouldn't have to carry yet. Cole went back downstairs. He poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window looking at the dark yard, and he thought about the meeting in 2 days, and about a woman on the phone who'd said the thing that stuck with him most. Not the offer of lawyers, not the resources, but the plain way she'd said it. My daughter called me, and I didn't pick up. No excuses folded into it, no self-protective qualifications, just the fact, stated directly, like someone reading their own verdict. He'd respected that. He didn't fully trust it yet, but he'd respected it. He drank his water and went to bed, and lay awake for a while listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. A dog somewhere, a car engine ticking down, the particular silence of a house where a child sleeps. And eventually, sometime after midnight, he slept. 3 miles away, in the corner bedroom of an apartment on the 14th floor of a building with a doorman and underground parking, Hailey Wexler lay in her own bed with the lights off, still wearing her school clothes, staring at the ceiling. Her phone was on her chest, screen down. She'd turned off notifications 2 hours ago because the volume of them had started to feel like a physical thing pressing on her. She thought about the man in the flannel shirt with the paint smear on his sleeve. She thought about the way he'd said, "Let her go." Not loudly, not with the theatrical aggression of someone who wanted to be watched, but with a flatness that communicated certainty, the way someone speaks when they are not imagining the possibility of being ignored. She thought about the fact that he'd gone back to his seat afterward and picked up his thermos. She didn't understand him yet, but she understood that something had happened in that gym that didn't happen often, which was that someone had looked in her direction and seen what was actually there and responded to it. She pulled the blanket up. Down the hall, she could hear her mother still awake. The low movement of someone trying to be quiet, the soft close of a laptop, footsteps past Hailey's door that paused briefly and then continued. Hailey closed her eyes. She did not sleep quickly, but she slept eventually, which was better than she'd managed on most nights recently. And when she woke in the morning, the mark on her throat had faded to something that could almost be mistaken for a shadow, if you weren't looking for it. Brianna had been looking. She was going to keep looking. It was, she understood now, too late, and with the particular clarity that arrives after the thing has already happened, the least she could do. The meeting at Brianna's offices lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes, which was an hour longer than Cole had planned to stay. The legal team she'd assembled occupied one side of a long conference table on the 22nd floor. 3 attorneys, 1 media consultant, and a woman named Dolores, who was introduced as a crisis communications specialist, and who had the particular stillness of someone who had sat in many rooms exactly like this one and was no longer surprised by anything she heard in them. Cole sat across from them with Patricia Oakes beside him. Patricia, who had spent the drive over telling him she was a contract lawyer and not a litigator, and who had nonetheless shown up in her best blazer with a notepad and a pen and the stubborn competence of someone refusing to be outclassed. Brianna sat at the head of the table. She'd offered coffee when they arrived. Cole had accepted. He'd looked around the office the way he looked around every unfamiliar space, not obviously, just cataloging, and noted the view of the city, the framed covers of business publications on the wall, and the fact that there was a child's drawing tucked into the corner of the whiteboard behind the main desk, slightly crooked, that nobody had straightened. A girl in a red dress standing next to a taller figure. Stick figure proportions, but with specific detail in the hair of the smaller one, drawn by someone who cared how the hair looked. He didn't say anything about it. The lead attorney, a compact man named Reyes, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, walked Cole through the current legal landscape in the brisk, organized way of someone billing by the hour, even when they weren't. The Vale family had not filed anything formal yet, but had retained counsel known for aggressive defamation work. 2 news outlets had published pieces that Reyes described as actionably misleading, and a third had used the phrase violent altercation in a headline that he said could be challenged given the available footage. The security camera footage from the gym had been formally requested by the school district's own investigation and could be subpoenaed if necessary. "The video is your strongest asset," Reyes said. 43 seconds of footage showing restraint, de-escalation, and proportional response. Any reasonable viewing of that video tells a story that directly contradicts what the Vale family's PR team is saying. "Then why isn't that the story people are reading?" Cole said. Reyes looked at him over the reading glasses. "Because you haven't told your story. Silence doesn't read as dignity in a media cycle. It reads as guilt or as something to hide. I don't want to perform being a veteran. I'm not suggesting you perform anything. I'm suggesting you allow the facts to be known rather than leaving the space empty for other people to fill." Cole turned his coffee cup in his hands. It was good coffee. Better than anything he made at home. Better than the thermos he carried to job sites. He noticed this and found it slightly annoying for no rational reason. What does that look like in practice? The media consultant, a man named Ferris, who had said almost nothing so far, leaned forward. "It looks like one statement. Not an interview, not a press conference. A single written statement, factual, brief, released through one outlet you choose and control. It names what happened. It names your service history without dwelling on it, and it lets the footage speak for the rest. And then? And then we let the investigation do its work. The school district is already under pressure from other parents. You're not the only family that has documented issues with Preston Vale. You're just the first one with 43 seconds of footage attached to the story." Cole looked at Brianna. She'd been quiet through most of this, letting her team run the meeting, which he'd noticed and partially respected. "You said no conditions when you called, no strings." "That's still true. So if I walk out of here and decide I'm not doing any of this, no statement, no lawyers, nothing, you're not going to attach some kind of consequence to that." Brianna met his eyes directly. "No, I'm not." "Why?" She said it without hesitation. "Because it wouldn't be right. You don't owe me anything. You helped my daughter." "I helped her because she needed it, not because I wanted anything in return." "I know that. That's why I'm trying to make sure you don't lose your livelihood over it." There was a silence around the table that wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but had some weight to it. Patricia Oakes, who had been writing steadily in her notepad, said without looking up, "I'd advise my client to consider the statement. The legal position is significantly stronger if the public record reflects an accurate account before any formal proceedings begin." Cole looked at his lawyer. Patricia met his eyes with the expression of a woman who was doing her best in unfamiliar territory and knew it and was doing it anyway. He looked back at Reyes. "I review everything before it goes out, every word." "Agreed." "Nothing goes out that I haven't approved personally." "Agreed." "And when this is over, whatever over looks like, I'm done. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm not a story. I go back to my job and my kid." Reyes nodded. Brianna said nothing, but Cole saw something in her expression that he filed away. Not agreement exactly, but something more complicated than that. An acknowledgement of something. The meeting ended at 12:40. Cole and Patricia rode the elevator down in a silence that lasted until the lobby. "Well," Patricia said. "Yeah. For what it's worth, the team she's assembled is very good." "I know. You're not going to say anything about the office?" "What about it?" "Cole, it's the entire top floor of a building with its name on the outside." "I noticed." "And?" He pushed through the revolving door into the cold air of the street. "And she's got a kid's drawing on her whiteboard." Patricia looked at him sideways. "People are what they have on their walls," he said, which wasn't something he'd ever articulated before and wasn't sure he believed entirely, but felt approximately true in this case. He pulled his jacket collar up and went to find his truck. The statement went out 4 days later. It was 6 paragraphs long. Cole had rewritten it 3 times, cutting 2 paragraphs Ferris had drafted that felt, to his eye, like they were working too hard. Too many adjectives, too much architecture around the facts. What he kept was simpler. It named the date, the location, what he had witnessed, what he had done. It stated that he was a former Navy SEAL and that his training had informed his response. It said that he had used the minimum force required to ensure the safety of a minor who was in distress, and that he had remained on scene and cooperated fully with school administration afterward. It made no claims about Preston Vale's character or intentions. It contained no appeals to sympathy. It was, Ferris told him, the most emotionally restrained statement he'd ever released in 15 years of crisis communications. Cole took this as a compliment. The response was not immediate, and it was not uniformly positive, and it did not resolve everything the way the legal team had suggested it might. Not because they'd been wrong, exactly, but because media cycles don't respond to facts the way a construction project responds to a corrected blueprint. Things shifted. The statement introduced a counter-narrative that some outlets picked up and some ignored. A veterans advocacy group shared it without being asked. The comment section of the original video changed, slowly, in composition and in tone. 2 families who had previously filed complaints against Preston Vale and been quietly dismissed contacted Reyes's office. The Branford contract called back. They did not reinstate the job. Cole spent an afternoon doing the math on what that meant for the next 4 months and came up with numbers he didn't like. He renegotiated 2 smaller contracts and picked up a side job on weekends that Dwight helped him arrange, and did not mention any of it to anyone outside of that conversation. Jamie's classmate Tyler Marsh stopped making comments about Cole after Tyler's mother apparently watched the full video and revised her opinion, an outcome Cole found out about, not from anyone telling him directly, but from Jamie reporting, with great satisfaction, that Tyler had said his dad was actually kind of cool. "Is that the same kid who said I was dangerous?" Cole said. "Yeah." "Tell him thanks." He reconsidered. "Actually don't, just let it go." Jamie thought about this. "Why?" "Because people change their minds, and it's better to let them do it without making it a thing." Jamie absorbed this with the expression he wore when storing something away. He was doing that more lately, taking things Cole said and turning them over quietly, the way you'd turn a coin over to check both sides. Cole noticed it and wasn't sure whether to feel reassured or worried. Probably both. The disciplinary hearing for Preston Vale was scheduled for a Thursday morning 3 weeks after the gym incident. Cole wasn't required to attend but went anyway, at Reyes's recommendation, because his presence on record mattered. He sat in a district conference room that smelled of carpet cleaner and stale air and listened to Preston's father's attorney, a tall man who wore his suit like a costume, argue that the incident had been mischaracterized by media coverage and that the school's response was disproportionate. Then they played the security footage. The room was very quiet while it ran. Cole watched himself move through the crowd, watched his own hands, controlled, specific, nothing wasted. Watched Preston's face in the moment. His arm came away from Hailey's throat. The flash of surprise that was not, Cole thought, the surprise of someone who'd expected resistance, but the specific surprise of someone who had never once been moved and had just been moved. The attorney for the Vale family said something after the footage ended about context and about the angle of the camera and about the difficulty of assessing dynamic physical situations from 2-dimensional recording. Nobody in the room looked particularly persuaded. Cole drove to the job site afterward and put in 6 hours on the Clement Street Foundation, which was running behind by 3 days due to weather and a supplier delay on rebar, and the physical work of it, the weight and the noise and the concrete specificity of materials behaving according to known properties, was something he needed more than he'd realized until he was in it. That evening Brianna called. I was in the truck in front of his house, not ready to go in yet, watching the light in Jamie's bedroom window where he could see the shadow movement of a 7-year-old doing something with action figures. Hearing went well, she said. Reyes thinks they'll recommend expulsion. Thinks or knows? Thinks. Nothing's certain until it's certain. A pause. How are you doing? Fine. She was quiet a moment. Cole, you don't have to say fine. I know. So, he watched Jamie's shadow move across the window. I'm tired. I lost a big contract. I've got a kid who's navigating things at school he shouldn't have to navigate. He stopped. But I'm okay. Those are just problems. Problems have solutions. Some of them do. Most of them. She made a sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. You're optimistic for someone with a satellite van outside his job site. The van's been gone for a week. I know. I'm told that's partly the statement. Partly. The rest of it is people finding the next thing to point cameras at. That too. He put his hand on the door handle, but didn't open it yet. How's Hailey? The half-second pause again. The one he'd noticed on the first call, that slight recalibration before she answered questions about her daughter. I think she's better. We've been talking more. Actually talking, not the version of talking that we were doing before where I thought we were communicating and she was just being polite. That's something. It's a lot, actually, for us. A pause. She asks about you. Cole didn't say anything. She wants to know if you're okay. She feels responsible, which I've told her isn't rational, but feelings aren't. Tell her I'm fine. And tell her it's not her responsibility. She didn't put herself in that situation. I've told her that. Tell her again. He opened the truck door. The cold air came in. I'll let you know if anything changes on the legal side. Okay. He got out of the truck. He was almost to the front door when his phone buzzed. A text from Brianna, which surprised him because they'd been talking on the phone 30 seconds ago. He stopped on the porch step and read it. She drew you a picture. She doesn't know I'm telling you this. I thought you should know someone did that. He stood on the step for a moment. Then he went inside. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, was when everything shifted again. Cole had picked up Jamie from school and was driving to the hardware store on Mercer Avenue. Jamie needed poster board for a school project about the water cycle, and Cole had forgotten to get it over the weekend. When his phone rang, he let it go. It rang again immediately after, which was the pattern of someone trying to reach him urgently, and he pulled into the hardware store lot and answered. It was Reyes. There's a situation, Reyes said. Hailey Wexler. She was at the Crestview Plaza, the outdoor mall on... I know where it is. She was there approximately 45 minutes ago with a friend. Preston Vale and 3 other boys approached her in the east parking lot. We don't have complete information yet, but Brianna is already en route, and I wanted you to know... Cole was already putting the truck in reverse. Dad, Jamie said, I need you to stay calm and stay in this truck no matter what, Cole said. Can you do that? Jamie looked at him. Not scared yet. Reading the situation, the way he'd learned to read his father's voice. What's happening? I need you to trust me for about 20 minutes. Can you do that? A pause. Then, yeah. Cole drove. The Crestview Plaza was 8 minutes from the hardware store on a clear afternoon, and it was a clear afternoon, and Cole drove it in 5.5 without running any lights, which required a level of restraint that cost him something. He pulled into the east lot and saw the scene from 30 yards out. 4 teenage boys, Hailey backed against the rear quarter panel of a parked car, a friend standing uselessly at her side. No adults anywhere in the immediate vicinity. He parked the truck at an angle across 2 spaces, which he'd deal with later. Stay, he told Jamie. Door locked. Don't open it for anyone except me. He got out. Preston Vale saw him coming from about 20 feet. Something moved across his face. Not fear, not quite, but the recognition of something he hadn't factored into his current calculations. He straightened up. He was wearing a school jacket with the Ridgecrest crest on it, which struck Cole as a specific and probably unconscious irony. Walk away, Cole said, still 10 feet out. His voice was exactly the same as it had been in the gym. Quiet, flat, carrying nothing decorative. This is a public parking lot, Preston said. You can't tell me. Walk away right now. Preston looked at the boys beside him. The look was one Cole recognized, the rapid check-in with the group, calibrating collective courage. 2 of the boys were already stepping back without appearing to decide to. The third was Preston's height, but leaner, and he held his ground, and Cole filed that away. You're not a cop, Preston said. You're not anything. You're just some guy who got lucky in a gym and now thinks... Cole stepped past him and put himself between Preston and Hailey. Simple geometry. He didn't touch anyone. He simply occupied the space that had been between them, which changed the entire physical logic of the situation. Hailey, he said, not taking his eyes off Preston. Are you hurt? No. Her voice was shaking. No, I'm okay. They just... Get to the front of the store. Take your friend. Don't stop. He heard them move. Preston watched them go with the expression of someone watching something they owned walk away. Then he looked back at Cole, and whatever calculation he'd been running reached its conclusion, and he swung. It was a decent punch, actually. Right hand, aimed at Cole's jaw, committed weight behind it. Cole moved his head 4 inches to the left, and the fist went past his ear, and he caught Preston's extended arm at the wrist and elbow simultaneously, and redirected the momentum forward and down in a controlled arc that deposited Preston against the hood of the parked car with a force that wasn't gentle but wasn't damaging either. Preston's cheek met the cool metal. His arm was extended behind him at an angle that held him there without requiring Cole to press down. The lean boy moved. Cole saw him move before he committed and turned into it, releasing Preston's arm, and the lean boy ran into a palm strike to the sternum that stopped him completely. Not a blow, not a hit in any conventional sense, just a wall of force applied to the center of his chest that redirected all his forward momentum directly downward, and he sat on the pavement with the stunned expression of someone whose body had just refused a request it had never refused before. The other 2 boys were already gone. Cole hadn't watched them go, but he could hear the distance in their footsteps. Preston pushed himself off the car hood, breathing hard, and turned to face Cole. His cheek was red. He was angrier than Cole had ever seen him. Not the performed anger he used in the gym, not the social anger designed for an audience, but something underneath it that was rawer and uglier and probably more honest. And then his hand went to his jacket pocket. Cole went still in the particular way that people who have been trained for exactly this kind of moment go still. Not frozen, not hesitant, but completely present in a way that ordinary stillness isn't. Every part of him reading the hand and the pocket and the slight change in Preston's shoulders as the thing in his hand changed his relationship to the moment. The knife was a folding knife, 4-inch blade, and it came out with the unpracticed movement of someone who had never used one for anything except the idea of it. "You think I'm scared of you," Preston said. He was not as scared as he should have been, which was the most dangerous version of this situation. "You think I'm some kid you can just—" "Preston." Cole's voice hadn't changed, still quiet, still without anything decorative. "Look up." "What?" "Look up." Preston glanced up reflexively. At the light pole at the corner of the parking lot, at the black dome housing mounted to it, the camera, its small red indicator light steady and unblinking. Cole saw the moment Preston processed what he was looking at. "Everything since I got out of that truck," Cole said, "is on that camera." Preston's grip on the knife shifted, not releasing it, but changing. "Everything that happened before I got here," Cole continued, "probably is too. The lot's covered. They always are." The lean boy was getting to his feet slowly. The hand he'd put on the pavement to push himself up was shaking slightly, which he was trying not to show. Cole did not move. He kept his eyes on the knife and kept his voice at the same level it had been throughout and said, "If you put that away right now and you walk away, what the camera has is you making a bad decision and then making a better one. That's something." He paused. "If you don't, what that camera has is a minor brandishing a weapon at an adult who hasn't touched you since you swung at me. That's something very different." Preston Vale was 16 years old and had never, in 16 years, been in a situation he couldn't buy his way out of or talk his way around. And the expression on his face in this moment was something Cole would think about later. Not with satisfaction, because satisfaction would have required him not to understand it, and he understood it too well. Preston was realizing, for what might have been the first time, that there were categories of consequence that his father's name did not cover. The knife went back in his pocket. Preston looked at Cole for a long moment. The red mark on his cheek was going to be a bruise by tomorrow. His jacket was dirty from the car hood. "This isn't over," Preston said. "I know," Cole said. "Go home." Preston went. The lean boy followed him without looking back. Cole stood in the parking lot and listened to their footsteps until he couldn't hear them anymore. Then he let out a breath that he'd been holding without realizing it and turned back toward his truck. Jamie was in the passenger seat with his seatbelt on, exactly where Cole had left him, watching through the windshield with those large, serious eyes. Cole opened the driver's door and got in. The truck was very quiet. Are you hurt? Jamie said. No. Is the girl okay? She's okay. Cole put the key in the ignition but didn't start it yet. His hands were steady. They were always steady, which was something he'd both relied on and sometimes resented in himself, because steadiness had a cost that didn't show up in the moment. Jamie, you did good, staying in the truck. That was the right thing. Jamie looked at him for a long moment. Not a 7-year-old's look, something older than that, something that came and went in his face sometimes. You knew what to do. I knew what I'd been trained to do. Is that different? Cole thought about that. A little, yeah. How? He looked through the windshield at the parking lot, empty now except for the cars that had been there before and the camera on its pole with its steady red light. Knowing what to do means you thought about it ahead of time. Being trained means your body knows it, even when you haven't had time to think. Jamie considered this. Which is better? Neither. Cole started the truck. Both. Depends on the situation. He checked the mirrors and pulled out of the lot. We still need poster board. Dad. Yeah. You were scared, weren't you? When he had the knife. Cole pulled out onto Mercer Avenue and drove toward the hardware store. The afternoon light was going orange at the edges. Jamie's dinosaur backpack was on the floor between his feet. Yeah, Cole said, but you didn't look scared. You learned to do that. You learn to feel the thing and keep going anyway. Why? Because being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means the situation is real and your brain is paying attention. He glanced at Jamie. Being scared is fine. Letting it make your decisions for you isn't. Jamie was quiet for the rest of the drive. Cole could feel him thinking. That particular quality of silence in a child who is turning something over and won't surface from it until they've gone all the way around it. He pulled into the hardware store lot and parked properly this time. He called Brianna while Jamie went in ahead of him. She picked up on the second ring, her voice tight in a way that told him she was either already at the plaza or very close. He's gone, Cole said. Hailey's safe. She's inside the store near the main entrance, east side. A brief silence. Are you hurt? No. Cole? Reyes is going to want to move fast, he said. The camera on the east lot pole recorded everything from when I arrived, probably from before. You need to get your team to formally request that footage tonight, before the Vale family thinks to. I'll call him right now. Her voice had shifted, back into the register she used when she was managing something, which Cole recognized as a coping mechanism as much as a competency, but it was also genuinely effective, and he'd take effective over elegant. Is Jamie? He's fine. He stayed in the truck. You brought your son. I didn't know what I was driving to. He stopped. I know. She didn't say anything else about it, which, he understood, was a choice she was making. Hailey will be in the store, he said again. I'll write up what I witnessed and get it to Reyes tonight. He hung up and went inside to help his 7-year-old find poster board for a project about the water cycle, and stood in the school supplies aisle under the fluorescent lights with the particular dazed quality of a man moving between realities that were too different to be adjacent and somehow kept being adjacent anyway, and helped Jamie choose between two identical sheets of white poster board that Jamie was treating as a genuine decision. This one, Jamie said finally. They're the same. This one's a little whiter. Cole looked at the two sheets of poster board. He could not distinguish between them. Okay, he said, and put Jamie's choice in the cart, and they went to find the register. Outside, in the east parking lot of the Crestview Plaza 8 blocks away, a camera on a light pole held 40 minutes of footage that included a knife, 2 witnesses, 4 boys, a 7-second window of the most controlled physical response most people would ever see outside of a controlled environment, and the image of a 16-year-old boy looking up at a lens and understanding, for the first time, that what he'd done was permanently real. Brianna Wexler stood at the entrance to the plaza store with her arms around her daughter, neither of them speaking, Hailey's face pressed against her mother's shoulder, the way it hadn't been in years, not since she was small enough that it was the automatic response to fear rather than a choice. And Brianna held on with the specific grip of someone who has understood something too late and is determined not to be too late twice. Her phone was in her pocket. She'd call Reyes in a minute. Right now, she just held on. The plaza footage was secured by Reyes' team that same evening, formally requested through the property management company before anyone from the Vale side had thought to act, which Reyes described on the phone as fortunate timing, and which Cole privately thought of as the difference between people who moved fast and people who assumed they had time. The footage showed everything. It showed Preston and three boys surrounding Hailey in the east lot for 4 minutes and 17 seconds before Cole's truck appeared at the edge of the frame. It showed the confrontation in full, Cole stepping between them, Preston swinging first, the controlled response, the lean boy's failed charge, and then the knife. Bright and specific and impossible to contextualize away, held by a minor who had initiated the physical contact and was now escalating it against an adult who had not thrown a single offensive movement in the entire sequence. Reyes called Cole the next morning. This changes the legal picture significantly. I figured. The Vale family's attorney called my office last night. They want to discuss a mutual resolution, meaning they want it to go away. Meaning they're aware that what they have on camera is their client's son committing aggravated assault with a deadly weapon on top of everything else, and they would prefer to manage that privately rather than through formal proceedings. Cole was standing in his kitchen. Jamie was at the table eating cereal, pretending not to listen in the specific way of children who are absolutely listening. What does Brianna want to do? A pause. I represent your interests, Mr. Vardell, not Miss Wexler's. I know. I'm asking what she wants. She wants full expulsion, formal documentation in the district's record, and a referral to the County Juvenile Review Board. She is not interested in a private resolution. Cole looked at Jamie's cereal bowl. There was a cartoon on the side of it, a faded one, from when Jamie was 4 or 5, a bowl they'd kept because Jamie refused to give it up. Neither am I, he said. Good. That's what I'll communicate. He hung up and sat down across from Jamie, who kept his eyes on his cereal for 3 more seconds, and then looked up with the transparency of someone who has given up on pretending. Is it the Preston kid again? Jamie said. It's being handled. Is he in trouble? Yeah, he is. Jamie stirred his cereal. Is he going to keep bothering that girl? Cole looked at his son. No, he's not. How do you know? Because this time the people who are supposed to stop him are going to actually stop him. He picked up his own coffee. It took longer than it should have. That happens sometimes. The right thing doesn't always happen fast. Jamie considered this with the gravity he brought to most things. That's frustrating. Yes, it is. But it happens eventually? Cole thought about the answer rather than giving the automatic reassuring one. More often than not. If people don't give up. Jamie nodded slowly, like someone accepting a difficult but accurate piece of information, and went back to his cereal, and the morning continued in the ordinary way of mornings that follow extraordinary nights. The formal disciplinary hearing for the Plaza incident was consolidated with the review of the original Jim complaint, and the combined weight of the security footage, only of 4 other families who had filed previous complaints that had been quietly shelved, produced an outcome that Hargrove announced in a district communication that was carefully worded and said nothing directly, and nonetheless conveyed everything. Preston Vale was permanently expelled from Ridgecrest and referred to the County Juvenile Review Board for the weapons charge. 2 administrators, including the assistant principal who had overseen the reassignment of Hailey's guidance counselor, were placed on administrative review pending an independent investigation into how previous complaints had been handled. The Vale family's attorney issued a statement calling the process rushed and politically motivated. Nobody paid it much attention. There was, by this point, too much footage. Cole heard the outcome from Reyes on a Thursday afternoon while he was reviewing rebar specifications for the Clement Street job, which had gotten back on schedule partly through extended hours and partly through Dwight's particular gift for motivating a crew through what could best be described as forceful encouragement. He thanked Reyes, hung up, and told Dwight the foundation inspection was clear. And the other thing, Dwight said without specifying what the other thing was, also cleared. Dwight made a sound of minimal acknowledgement and went back to the clipboard, which was, for Dwight, the equivalent of a standing ovation. Cole drove home that evening feeling something he couldn't immediately name. Not relief exactly, because relief implied the tension had fully released, and it hadn't, not completely, because things like this didn't end cleanly the way a closed door ends a room. The people who'd been damaged by Preston Vale's behavior were going to carry it in the particular private way that people carry things that happen to them in school hallways and parking lots, long after the institutional record was corrected. That was a fact he couldn't do anything about. But the mechanism that had allowed it to continue was disrupted now, and that mattered, and he let himself feel that it mattered on the drive home through the ordinary afternoon streets. He picked up Jamie from his after-school program. Jamie had been working on the water cycle project and had covered approximately 60% of the poster board with drawings of rain clouds that were, Cole thought, technically accurate, if stylistically ambitious. "My teacher said it looks like a storm is eating the ocean," Jamie reported. "Your teacher's not wrong. She said it in a nice way." "Good." "Dad." Jamie looked at the poster board on the back seat. "Is the bad stuff over now?" Cole glanced in the rearview mirror. "The specific bad stuff we've been dealing with, yeah, it's done. But in general, sometimes bad stuff happens." "In general, yeah." "Okay." Jamie appeared to find this acceptable, which told Cole something about how his son had been processing the last several weeks. Not waiting for a promise that everything was fine, just waiting for a clear answer about the current situation. He filed that away as something to be proud of, and also something to worry about in the quiet way he worried about things regarding Jamie, which was constantly and without resolution. That night, Brianna called at 8:30. Cole was on the back porch with a beer he'd barely touched, watching the temperature drop in the way it did in late fall, the yard going dark by degrees. "Reyes told you," she said, "this afternoon. How are you feeling about it?" "Like it's the right outcome, like it took too long." A pause. "Like the kids who didn't have footage of what happened to them are going to have to live with a record that's only partially corrected." "I know." Her voice had something in it he hadn't heard before. Not sadness exactly, more like fatigue, the kind that comes from sustained effort rather than a single hard day. "I've been in contact with 2 of those families. There's not much I can do about the past record, but I've offered to connect them with Reyes if they want to pursue anything independently." "They might not want to." "I know. I told them that was okay too." A pause. "Cole, I want to ask you something, and I need you to tell me honestly if it's overstepping." He waited. "Hailey has been asking about you. Not asking to contact you. She's not that forward. She'd die before she admitted she wanted something. But she asks her questions sideways, the way teenagers do. How is he doing? Is everything resolved? Did the construction job work out?" A beat. "She drew you something. I mentioned it in a text. I wasn't sure you'd want to know." "I wanted to know." "I thought you might." He heard her exhale. "She's been having trouble sleeping since the parking lot. Not dramatically. She gets up, she reads, she goes back. But she woke up 3 times the night after it happened and the night after that. I've been sitting up." She stopped herself. "I'm not telling you that as a complaint. I'm not used to sitting up for her. I used to think that was something she'd outgrown. I didn't realize she'd just stopped telling me about it." Cole looked at his yard. A tree he'd planted the spring after his wife died was visible at the edge of the porch light, big enough now that it shaded the back fence in summer, something he hadn't fully noticed until this moment. "She'll get back to sleeping," he said. "I know. It takes a little while. After something like that, your body holds on to it even when your mind has moved on." Speaking from experience. "Yeah." A silence. Not uncomfortable. The kind of silence on the phone with someone that means you're both still there and don't need to fill it. "There's something I want to propose," Brianna said, "and I genuinely mean it as a question, not a plan I've already made. You can say no." "Okay." "Hailey wants to learn, not just self-defense. She's been reading about situational awareness, about de-escalation. She wants to understand how you saw things before they escalated, in the gym and in the parking lot. She wants to know how you knew what to do." A pause. "I think she wants to understand it so she doesn't feel like it can happen again without her seeing it coming, whether or not that's fully achievable." Cole turned the beer bottle in his hands. "It's partially achievable." "I told her that. She said partial was better than none." "She's not wrong." He thought for a moment. "I'm not a certified instructor." "She's not looking for certification. I think she's looking for someone who can teach her the thing that exists underneath the techniques. The way of reading a room." Cole was quiet for a moment. The porch light caught the edge of a leaf falling from the tree he'd planted. "There's a community center 2 blocks from my job site. They've been after me for 6 months to run a self-defense workshop. I've been saying no because I don't want to be a brand. I know the difference between being a brand and doing something useful. I know you do. He paused. Tell Hailey yes, but she comes to a group session, not a private one. I'm not singling her out, and she learns alongside other people, which is how it actually works anyway. Real situations aren't private. A beat. She'll say yes to that. And Brianna? Yeah. You come too. A longer pause this time. I don't know what I'd... You don't need to know. You just come. He picked up his beer. Hailey needs to see you learning something you don't already know how to do. That matters more than the techniques. The pause was long enough that he wondered if he'd overstepped. Then she said quietly, Okay. Okay meaning yes, we'll be there. The first session at the Maplewood Community Center was on a Saturday morning in November, gray and cold outside. The center's main meeting room rearranged with the folding tables pushed to the walls and the chairs stacked. 11 people showed up, which was more than Cole had expected and slightly fewer than the community center coordinator had predicted. They ranged in age from Hailey at 16 to a retired postal worker named Bernard, who was 64 and had been following the story online and showed up, he explained cheerfully, because he had always wanted to learn this stuff and never had an excuse before. Cole stood at the front of the room in jeans and his work boots and a gray pullover that had a small tear in the left cuff that he hadn't noticed until he was already there. And he looked at the 11 people looking at him and felt the specific discomfort of someone who prefers to be watched as little as possible being watched with great attention. He started talking. He did not start with techniques. He started with the thing that Brianna had half described on the phone, the layer underneath the techniques, the thing that was actually being trained when people thought they were learning to throw a punch or step out of a grab. He talked about attention. He talked about the difference between looking at a room and reading it, and why most people looked and almost nobody read, and how to start developing that habit without becoming paranoid, which was a real risk and worth naming directly. He talked about the exits in this room right now, and asked people to locate them without turning around, and watch the room realize they couldn't do it, which was the point. You've been in this building for 20 minutes, he said. You walked through a main entrance. There are 2 other exits. One is behind me to the left, and one is through the kitchen at the back right. Neither of you located those without turning around, which means if something started happening in this room right now, your first 5 seconds would be spent orienting, not moving. Bernard raised his hand. I saw the left one. You're right. You did. Cole nodded at him. Everyone else. Now you know. That's actually all it takes. Someone points it out once, and from now on you look for exits when you enter a room. That's a habit. Habits cost nothing except the first time you build them. He watched Hailey, who was standing near the back with Brianna. Hailey had her arms slightly crossed, not defensively, more like she was cold, which she probably was because the center's heating was inconsistent, and she was watching Cole with the focused, slightly guarded attention of someone determined not to be seen trying too hard. Brianna stood beside her with her hands in her jacket pockets, and Cole could tell she was uncomfortable in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature, that she was in a room doing something she didn't know how to do yet, and was dealing with it through careful stillness. He found to his own mild surprise that he respected that more than he would have respected comfort. The session ran 90 minutes. They covered situational reading, distance management, and 2 basic movement principles that Cole drilled until everyone in the room had done each one at least 8 times with a partner. Not because 8 was a magic number, but because it took roughly that many repetitions for the body to stop thinking about the movement and just do it. Bernard turned out to be a natural, or at least someone whose body had retained enough muscle memory from a previous era of physical activity to absorb new patterns quickly. He dropped into the correct stance without prompting on his 4th attempt, and looked at Cole with an expression of genuine delight. I think I've been waiting to learn this my whole life, Bernard said. Better late than never, Cole said, and meant it. Near the end of the session, Cole paired people for a simple exercise, a partner holding a position, the other moving to create better distance and angles, then switching. He paired Hailey with a woman named Greta, who was in her 30s and had a calm, patient way of moving that Cole thought would serve Hailey better than a more aggressive partner. He paired Brianna with Bernard, which was a choice he made for reasons he didn't fully articulate even to himself. Brianna started the exercise with the careful, controlled movements of someone translating instructions into physical action with significant conscious effort. Not graceless, but deliberate in the way that deliberateness becomes its own problem when the point is spontaneity. Bernard moved with her patiently, not correcting, just responding to what she did, and after 3 attempts something changed slightly in how she was holding her shoulders. Cole watched this from across the room and said nothing. After the session, while people were pulling on coats and the community center coordinator was already talking about scheduling more dates, Hailey came to stand near Cole while he rearranged the chairs back into their original positions. She picked up a chair without being asked and carried it to the wall. "That was not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know, something more dramatic." "The dramatic stuff doesn't work without this stuff." He set another chair against the wall. "You can learn to throw someone twice your size in one afternoon if you have the leverage mechanics right. But if you can't read the room before it gets to that point, the throw comes too late." Hailey thought about that. "In the gym, you saw it before it got bad." "I saw something that didn't look right. I watched it for a few minutes before I moved." "What would you have done if it had resolved itself?" "Gone back to my cold coffee." She almost smiled. It was a small movement, quickly controlled, but Cole caught it. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "What does it feel like when you're in it, when it's actually happening?" Cole looked at the last 2 chairs. "Cold," he said. "Not scared, not calm. Cold. Like everything narrows down to the information that's relevant and everything else gets quiet. Is that training or is that you?" He picked up both remaining chairs and set them against the wall. "I don't know anymore. Both, probably. I've had it long enough that I can't separate them." Hailey nodded slowly. Not like she fully understood it yet, but like she was filing it away to understand later. "Thank you," she said, "for the parking lot." "You don't need to eat." "I know I don't need to. I want to." She looked at him with the directness she occasionally deployed, the particular directness of a teenager who has spent a long time being overlooked and has learned to speak plainly when she decides to speak at all. "You didn't know me. You still came." Cole held her gaze for a moment. "That's not something to thank me for. That's just what you do." She looked at him for another second and then nodded once and went to get her jacket. Brianna was waiting near the door. She was talking to Bernard, who appeared to be telling a story that involved considerable hand movement, and she was listening with more genuine attention than Cole would have predicted from someone who probably had 17 things on her phone demanding to be managed. When Cole approached, Bernard wrapped up his story. Something about a time he'd almost gotten into a fight outside a bus station in 1987, which had resolved peacefully through what he described as strategic conversation, and excused himself with the easy warmth of someone who makes friends in 90-minute increments. Cole and Brianna stood by the door as the room cleared. "You're good at this," she said. "I'm okay at it." "You're good at it. The part where you explained attention rather than just drilling techniques. Hailey's going to think about that for a long time." She asked good questions. She asked good questions at school too, and nobody notices. Brianna said it without bitterness, more like a fact she was still in the process of deciding what to do with. She hides how smart she is because she's learned that being smart doesn't protect you from Preston Vale. "Nothing fully protects you," Cole said. "That's part of what I tried to say. The point isn't invulnerability. The point is being less of a surprise to yourself when something happens." Brianna looked at him. "That's true of a lot of things." "Yeah." The room was almost empty now. The community center coordinator was turning off the extra lights at the far end. Outside, through the single window near the door, Cole could see the gray November sky and the parking lot where Brianna's car and his truck were parked in adjacent spaces, which he hadn't noticed until now. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said. "Yes." "When Hailey was small, before the company got as big as it is, was it different?" Brianna was quiet for a moment, looking at the floor near her feet. "Yes and no. I always worked a lot. Even before there was a company to run, I was working, building it, which is in some ways more consuming than running it once it exists. But there was a period when Hailey was maybe 4 or 5, where I could put the work down at 6 and it would stay down." She paused. "I don't know exactly when that stopped. That's the honest answer. I don't know the specific moment it changed. I just know that at some point Hailey stopped expecting me to be there at dinner and started seeming fine with it, and I took that as a sign that she was adjusting well, and I was wrong. She wasn't fine. She was managing, which at that age looks the same as fine, but isn't." Brianna looked up. I spent a long time being good at my job and telling myself that was enough. That providing the structure, the school, the apartment, the opportunities, was what mattered most. And then a man I'd never met stepped in front of my daughter in a parking lot, and the structure didn't feel like enough anymore. Cole didn't say anything. I'm not trying to make you responsible for that realization, she said quickly. I know what it sounds like, he said, and I don't think that's what you're saying. She looked at him. What am I saying? You're saying sometimes it takes something happening from outside to show you the thing that was always there. He paused. I know that. I've been there. With Jamie. With Jamie, yeah, and with other things. The coordinator called out that she was locking the side entrance, and they both moved toward the main door. Cole held it for Brianna, a reflex, and she went through without comment, and they stood on the concrete steps in the cold air while Hailey climbed into the passenger seat of Brianna's car 20 yards away. Next session is in 2 weeks, Cole said. We'll be there. Bring warmer clothes. We're going to do more movement. Noted. She turned her collar up against the wind. Cole, I know you said no to the media stuff, the public profile. I'm not changing my mind on that. I know. I'm not asking you to. She looked at him directly, the way she did, without softening it into something easier. I just wanted to say that what you built in that room today, the way you explained it, the way you treated people, that's not nothing. Whatever you decide to do with it. He looked at her for a moment. The cold had put some color in her face. She looked less like the person in the framed magazine covers in her office, and more like someone who'd been standing outside without enough layers and was dealing with it. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks. She walked to her car. Cole went to his truck. He sat for a moment before starting it, watching Brianna's car pull out of the lot with Hailey's profile visible in the passenger window, and felt something he recognized as beginning, not the dramatic beginning of something large, but the quiet beginning of something that might last, which was a different and in some ways more significant feeling. He started the truck and drove to pick up Jamie from his Saturday program at the school 3 blocks over. The weeks that followed had their own rhythms, which were ordinary in the way that weeks are ordinary, made of small decisions and accumulated hours and conversations that didn't know they were important at the time. The community sessions continued twice a month, growing by 2 or 3 attendees each time. Cole started requesting a slightly larger room from the coordinator, who told him she'd always believed in this and had been right, which Cole accepted without disputing because there was no useful argument to be made against someone being right. Bernard became a reliable fixture, bringing occasionally a friend or a neighbor, becoming something like the group's informal ambassador, stopping Cole after sessions to report on which techniques he'd mentally rehearsed during the week and which ones still felt awkward. The pivot, Bernard said one evening. I do it wrong every time. You turn your shoulders first. The hip goes first. Then the shoulder follows. My hip doesn't do what I tell it anymore. Work with what it does instead of what it used to do. Bernard tried this, and it was slightly better, and he looked at Cole with the satisfaction of a man who has fixed a small thing and believes small things matter, which was an attitude Cole found more comfortable than he would have expected in someone he'd met 2 months ago in a community center. Hailey improved faster than Cole had predicted, which he told her directly in the 6th session, which was a mistake in the sense that she immediately tried to do something more complicated than she was ready for and strained her wrist slightly, not seriously, enough to be annoying for 3 days. She came back the following session with the wrist wrapped and her chin at a particular angle that communicated she was going to pretend this hadn't happened. Cole did not mention it. She did, eventually. I tried to rush. I know. You should have said something. I did. I said you were improving. You decided that meant you were further along than you were. She looked at him with the expression of someone accepting a point they'd rather not. That's annoying. Yes. Is that a lesson? If you want it to be. She worked on the things she'd rushed for the rest of the session, at the actual speed it required, which was slower and less satisfying in the short term and would work in real conditions in a way the rushed version wouldn't have. Jamie came to the session sometimes when Cole couldn't arrange other coverage, sitting on the stacked chairs with his homework spread across one folded table, appearing to work on it, and in fact watching everything with his particular quality of attention that Cole had stopped trying to limit because it was simply how Jamie was built. He and Hailey developed a relationship in the sideways manner of people who are 17 years apart and have no established category for each other. She'd bring him something from the vending machine without being asked. He'd show her things on his phone. They had a running disagreement about which dinosaur would survive in a modern environment that had occupied at least 6 separate conversations and showed no sign of resolving. "The T-Rex," Jamie said one afternoon while Hailey wrapped her wrist before the session started. "The T-Rex is too big and too slow. It would be hunted to extinction within decades." "By who? What's hunting a T-Rex?" "Humans, with guns." Jamie considered this. "Okay, but if there weren't humans?" "There are humans." "In my scenario, there aren't." Hailey looked at Cole, who was arranging the room and pretending not to follow this. "Do you have these arguments with him?" "I stay out of it." "That's not an answer." "It absolutely is." Brianna watched this exchange from the door where she'd just arrived, still in her work coat, and she had the look of someone seeing something they hadn't expected to be moved by and being moved by it anyway. She caught Cole's eye, and he looked away and went back to the chairs. And she came in and set her bag down and took off her coat, and the session began. After the session, in the parking lot, the 4 of them stood for a few minutes in the cold that had deepened into genuine winter now. Jamie told Hailey about a project he was working on about animal adaptations. Hailey asked 3 questions that were more informed than Jamie had expected, and Jamie looked at her with the recalibrating expression that Cole recognized. Cole and Brianna stood a few feet apart, not quite in the circle of the children's conversation, not quite separate from it. "He's a great kid," Brianna said quietly, not to interrupt. "He is." Cole watched Jamie explaining something with both hands, a habit he'd had since before he could reliably form sentences. "He worries more than he should. He's been doing it since he was 4, and I haven't found a way to help him with it that doesn't involve just showing him repeatedly that things work out." "Does that work?" "Slowly." Brianna was quiet a moment. "Hailey worries in the opposite direction. She pretends she doesn't need anything until she does, and by then she's been needing it for 6 months. I noticed." "I know. I think that's why she responds to you. You notice things without making them into a big thing." Cole thought about that. "She told you that?" "She said you don't make a production of knowing something, that you just know it and act accordingly." "She's 16. She overthought that." "She's perceptive," Brianna said. "She got that somewhere." He looked at her sideways. She was watching Hailey, not him, with the expression of someone who was still in the process of learning how to be with someone they loved. Not comfortably, not with false ease, but genuinely, with the work showing. He understood that kind of love. It was the only kind he trusted anymore. "You want to get coffee?" he said. She turned to look at him. "After I drop Jamie," he said. "There's a place on Meridian that's open late. If you're not—" "Yes," she said before he'd finished. Not "I'd love that" or "what a nice idea." Just yes, direct and without decoration, which was, Cole thought, exactly the right answer. He called Jamie and told him to get in the truck. Hailey said goodnight to Jamie first, which Jamie accepted with the 7-year-old dignity of someone who was privately very pleased about this. Brianna told Hailey she'd be home by 10, and Hailey said okay in the particular teenager voice that contained neither objection nor enthusiasm, and therefore conveyed acceptance, which was its own kind of progress. Cole drove Jamie home, made sure he was fed and settled with his book, and called the neighbor who watched Jamie on occasional evenings, and who had standing instructions that Cole left in the kitchen drawer and had never needed to use more than once to establish. He drove to the coffee place on Meridian. Brianna was already there. She'd gotten a table in the back, away from the window, which he noted. She had her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, and she looked up when he came in, and there was a moment, brief, not performed, where neither of them said anything, and it wasn't awkward. It was just the pause of 2 people who have been moving fast for a long time, finally sitting down in the same room with no particular agenda. He ordered coffee, black, from a server who was very young and very earnest, and sat across from Brianna in the back corner of a place that smelled like dark roast and old wood. They talked for 2 hours. Not about the legal situation, which was largely resolved. Not about Preston Vale, who existed now primarily as a cautionary reference in the district's documentation. They talked about other things, about the community sessions and what Cole wanted to do with them long term, about whether there was value in expanding the curriculum to cover digital safety alongside physical awareness, which Hailey had apparently suggested and which Cole found genuinely interesting. They talked about Brianna's company, Not the business metrics, not the public story, but the specific thing she had built and what she'd meant to build when she started it, and where those two things had diverged. They talked about Cole's wife, briefly, in the careful way he had learned to talk about her, which was directly but without rehearsal, just saying what was true. She was practical, he said. Not unromantic, she just didn't waste a lot of time on the version of things instead of the actual thing. That sounds like you. I think I learned it from her. I was more complicated before. You're still complicated. I'm better at hiding it. Brianna looked at him. You're not hiding it that well. He almost smiled. She caught it. How long has it been? She said. 4 years in February. Jamie was 3. Almost 3. He remembers her, but the memories are getting harder to separate from photographs. That's been hard to watch. He paused. He told me last year that he was scared he was forgetting what her voice sounded like. We found a video on my phone, one of those accidental ones. She was talking in the background about something completely mundane, a grocery list, I think, and we've watched it so many times that I'm scared the phone's going to die. Brianna didn't say anything, not the thing people usually said. I've had the audio pulled off and backed up in 3 different places, Cole said, because I was more afraid of losing it than I wanted to be. She looked at her coffee. I don't have anything that honest to tell you about Hailey's father. He left when she was 2, and I spent so long being relieved that he was gone that I didn't fully process what it meant for her that he wasn't there. She paused. I told myself she was fine because she seemed fine. I tell myself a lot of things about fine. You're working on it. I am, imperfectly. That's the only way it works. She looked at him. Outside, through the window at the front of the cafe, the street was empty in the late evening way of November streets, cold and specific, and nobody else in it. Cole, she said. Yeah. I'm glad you went to that basketball game. He looked at her, at the tiredness in her face and the particular alertness underneath it, and the way she held her coffee mug with both hands like it was the warmest thing in the room, which it probably was. So am I, he said. And that, for now, was enough. The coffee on Meridian became a habit before either of them named it as one. That was how it started. Not with a declaration, not with a conversation where they sat across from each other and decided something. It started with a second Tuesday evening after the community session when Brianna said she had 45 minutes before she needed to get back, and Cole said the place on Meridian was probably still open, and neither of them treated it as anything more significant than it was in that moment, which was 2 tired people who had been moving in the same direction for long enough that stopping in the same place felt natural. By December, they were meeting there on non-session weeks, too. By January, it had migrated occasionally to a dinner that was not called a dinner, at a restaurant neither of them had chosen for its atmosphere, where they talked about the community program and Hailey and Jamie and Brianna's company and Cole's contract situation, which had stabilized but not fully recovered, and about other things that had no practical bearing on anything but that they talked about anyway, because talking to someone who didn't require explanation had become something Cole hadn't realized he'd been missing until he had it again. He was careful about it. Not cold. Careful. There was a difference that mattered to him. He'd learned the hard way that moving fast through grief into something new was one of the more effective ways to damage both the new thing and the unfinished grief simultaneously, and he had no interest in repeating that lesson. He kept the 2 parts of his life in their separate compartments and let them find their own way toward each other at the pace they found, which was slow and sometimes frustrating and probably correct. Brianna was patient with this in the way she was patient with things she understood the logic of. She did not push. She also did not pretend the thing between them wasn't there, which Cole respected more than patience, the simple honesty of acknowledging what was actually happening without forcing it into a shape it wasn't ready for. Jamie noticed because Jamie noticed everything and had since before he could articulate what noticing was. He brought it up on a Sunday morning in February while they were making pancakes, which was their weekend ritual, Cole at the stove, Jamie in charge of the blueberries with instructions not to eat more than he put in the bowl, instructions that were only partially followed. Do you like Hailey's mom? Jamie said. Cole flipped a pancake. She's a good person. That's not what I asked. Cole looked at his son, 7 years old going on 40. Why are you asking? Because you look different when she's around. Different how? Jamie thought about this with genuine effort. Like you're paying more attention, like when you're at a job site that has something going on that you want to know about. Cole looked back at the pancakes. The comparison was more accurate than he was prepared to deal with at 7:40 on a Sunday morning. I think she's a good person, and I like spending time with her, he said. That's an honest answer. Are you going to do something about it? I'm thinking about it. How long have you been thinking about it? Jamie. I'm just asking. A while, Cole said. These things take time. Jamie accepted a blueberry from the bowl, one of the ones he was supposed to be putting in the batter, and ate it thoughtfully. Mom would want you to, he said. I think. The pancake on the griddle needed attention. Cole gave it attention and was grateful for the task. What makes you say that, he said, when he trusted his voice to sound normal. Because she wasn't the kind of person who wanted you to be sad forever. Jamie said it with the simple certainty of someone reporting a fact they've known for a long time. She told me stuff. Cole turned from the stove. What stuff? Just stuff. About how you were before. That you used to be more, she said you used to laugh more. Before your job got really serious. Jamie looked at the blueberry bowl. I was really little, so I only remember some of it. But I remember that part. Cole set the spatula down. He crossed to the table and crouched to Jamie's level and put a hand on his son's face the way he had since Jamie was an infant, palm flat against his cheek. Jamie let him. You're something else, you know that, Cole said. I know, Jamie said seriously. Cole almost laughed. It surprised him. The laugh itself, not the impulse, but how easy it came. He stood back up and went back to the stove, and they ate their pancakes at the kitchen table with the February light coming through the window, and Jamie told him at length about the Animal Adaptation Project's final presentation, and Cole listened to every word. He told Brianna that evening, on the phone, what Jamie had said. Not all of it. The part about what his wife had told Jamie that stayed between the two of them, but the part about the job site attention, which made Brianna quiet for a moment. That's an oddly precise observation for a 7-year-old, she said. He's an oddly precise 7-year-old. What did you tell him? I told him I was thinking about it. A pause. And what did he say? He asked how long I'd been thinking about it. She laughed. An actual laugh, not the polite version. Cole had learned the difference over the last 2 months and found the actual version considerably preferable. What did you say? I said a while. And? He looked out the kitchen window at the dark yard. The tree was bare now, winter stripped, but the structure of it was visible in a way the summer leaves obscured. The branching pattern, where it had grown around a fence post years ago and incorporated the obstacle into its shape, a slight curve in the lower trunk that was purely the result of having been next to something that didn't move. And I think I'm done thinking about it, he said. The pause on her end was different from her other pauses. Cole. Yeah. Are you sure? No, but I'm done waiting until I am. He paused. That's not a speech. It's just what's true. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something he hadn't expected, which was that she was scared. Of what? He said. Of doing it wrong again. Of being the version of myself that chooses the thing in front of me over the person who needs me. Her voice was even, but he could hear the effort in it. I've done it before. I know how I do it. I get focused, and the focus becomes everything else gets quieter, and I don't notice how quiet until someone tells me, or until I see it on camera. I know, he said. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you. I'm saying I know how you work, and it hasn't changed how I feel about spending time with you. He paused. You're not the same person you were a year ago. You sat up with Hailey for 3 nights in a row after the parking lot incident. You rescheduled a board meeting to take her to lunch. You show up to a community center twice a month and learn things you're not good at in front of strangers. I'm getting better at the pivot, she said. Bernard is better at the pivot. Bernard was an athlete in a previous life. He was a postal worker. A very athletic postal worker, apparently. A pause. I'm not the same as I was. I know that. I needed to say the scared part out loud. I know. He moved away from the window. Say it out loud as many times as you need to. That's a policy, not a one-time offer. She was quiet for a moment, and then, okay? Okay meaning I heard you, and yes. A beat. In case that needed saying. It didn't need saying, he said, but I'm glad you said it. The community safety event at Ridgecrest was scheduled for April, almost exactly 1 year after the gym incident, organized by the new administration in partnership with 3 parent groups and the district's newly hired student safety coordinator, a position that had not existed 12 months ago and had been created partly in response to the investigation findings and partly in response to Brianna Wexler presenting the district board with a 30-page documentation of systemic failures that Reyes had helped her compile and that she had delivered in person at a public board meeting in March, in the particular tone of someone who had studied every page and intended to be taken seriously. They had taken her seriously. Cole was asked to speak at the event. He said no to speaking and yes to demonstrating, which the coordinator accepted because she was practical and had learned in the course of organizing this event that Cole Vardell was easier to work with if you presented the request in terms of what was actually needed, rather than what would look good on a program. What was actually needed, it turned out, was the same thing the community center sessions provided. Not a performance of safety, but a practical demonstration of the habits that made it more likely. Cole brought 4 of his regular participants from the Maplewood sessions, including Bernard, who arrived in a pressed shirt that he had clearly chosen for the occasion and who shook hands with everyone he met with an enthusiasm that Cole found both touching and mildly alarming. The gym at Ridgecrest looked different in April afternoon light than it had on that Tuesday evening in the fall. Cole stood at the entrance to it for a moment before going in. Not dramatically, not performing reflection, just standing there for a second with the particular attention of someone checking whether a place has changed or whether they're the thing that changed. Both, probably. Both usually. Hailey found him at the entrance. She'd grown, or at least she carried herself differently, which sometimes looked like the same thing. She was wearing her hair differently too, pulled back rather than forward, which in the gym that first night had partially obscured her face from the angle of the student section, a detail Cole had filed away and never mentioned. She looked, in this April light in this gymnasium doorway, like someone who had decided to take up more space, which was not a small thing for a person who had spent 2 years learning to take up less. "You okay?" she said, not asking if he was nervous or uncomfortable, just the straight question. "Yeah." He looked around the gym. The bleachers were already filling, parents, students, administrators, and the careful formation of people who know they are being observed. Near the center of the floor, the Maplewood group was setting up with the quiet efficiency of people who had done variations of this many times. "You?" "Better than the last time I was in this gym." She said it plainly, without drama. Which isn't a high bar, but still. It's a real bar. "Yeah." She looked at the center of the floor where Bernard was making friends with a school administrator by talking about something that appeared to involve a great deal of enthusiasm on Bernard's part and patient attention on the administrators. "He's something. He's the best student I've had." Hailey looked at Cole sideways. "Better than me? You're second. That's insulting. You tried to rush a wrist technique and sprained yourself. Once. Once is enough to drop you to second." She almost smiled. Did smile, actually. Not the small, controlled version, but the real one, quick and unguarded, there and gone. "Fair," she said. Brianna appeared from the direction of the main entrance, slightly out of breath from parking. She had, Cole had learned, a complicated relationship with parking structures that involved significantly more circling than was statistically necessary, and came to stand with them in the gymnasium doorway. She looked at the gym and at Hailey and then at Cole, and the look was one he'd learned to read over the course of the winter. The simultaneous processing of multiple things, the slight adjustment of something behind her eyes as she took in what was in front of her. "How are we doing?" she said. "Good," Cole said. "Ready," Hailey said. Brianna looked at her daughter for a moment with the specific attention she'd been bringing to Hailey lately. Not anxious attention, not the guilty overcorrection Cole had watched her navigate in the fall, but the quieter, more sustained kind that came from having decided to actually look. "You look good," she said. "Mom." "I know, I'm just saying." Hailey shook her head but didn't move away, and they went into the gymnasium together, the 3 of them, through the same doors Cole had come through on a Tuesday evening 11 months ago with his cold coffee and his son's hand and no particular plan for what the night would become. The event ran 2 hours. Cole kept it practical, which meant he ignored most of the program format and restructured it on the fly into something closer to the Maplewood sessions. Demonstrations that became participation, participation that became genuine learning, learning that became, near the end, something Cole hadn't fully planned for, which was a room full of parents and teenagers doing partner exercises together in a gym, where, not long ago, those same teenagers had stood in a circle and watched something happen to someone and not known what to do. It wasn't a transformation. Cole had no patience for the word transformation when applied to 90 minutes of activity in a room. But it was something, a shift in the room's awareness of itself, the small, specific feeling of people who have been handed a tool and understand for the first time what it might be for. Afterward, while the room gradually emptied and the parent groups collected their materials, and the administrator with the pressed shirt talked to Bernard about something Bernard was finding very funny, a girl came to stand near Cole who he didn't immediately recognize. She was 15 or 16, brown-haired, and she waited at a respectful distance until Cole looked at her directly, which told him something about her, that she'd been taught to wait to be acknowledged rather than interrupt, which was either very good manners or a sign that she'd learned to make herself small. Possibly both. "Hi," she said. "Hi. I go to school here." She paused. "I knew Hailey, before. Not well, but we had English together." She stopped again. "I was there, in the gym, last year." Cole waited. "I filmed it," she said. "The video that got posted, that was my phone." He looked at her. She was holding her jacket in front of her with both hands, not wearing it, wringing the fabric slightly. "Okay," he said. "I've been wanting to... I don't know if I needed to tell you that. I just wanted to." She looked up. "I've thought about it a lot. Whether I should have done something instead of filming. Whether filming was... I don't know if it helped or made things worse." Cole thought about the answer carefully, which she deserved. "It helped," he said. "The footage mattered. Legally, practically. It changed the outcome. But in the moment, I didn't film it to help anyone. I filmed it because it was happening and I didn't know what else to do." "I know." He looked at her directly. "That's an honest thing to say. Most people wouldn't say it." She looked at the gym floor. "I keep thinking about what I could have done if I'd known any of what we did today. If I'd known how to look at a situation and understand it earlier." "Then come to the sessions at Maplewood," Cole said, "second and fourth Saturday. You don't need to sign up for anything. You just show up." She looked at him. "Really?" "We're not at capacity, and we never will be." She nodded once and then said thank you in the careful way of someone meaning it exactly as stated, no more and no less, and walked back toward a cluster of her friends near the exit. Cole watched her go and thought about what she'd said, that she'd filmed it because it was happening and she didn't know what else to do, and thought about how that was true of most of the things people did in the moments that ended up mattering. They did the thing they could do in the moment they were in, without the knowledge of how it would turn out, without the ability to see themselves from outside. That girl had filmed 11 seconds of a situation she didn't fully understand, and those 11 seconds had become evidence in proceedings that had changed a school's culture, gotten 2 administrators removed, and prompted 3 other families to come forward with complaints they'd been sitting on for years. She'd thought she was just filming. She'd been doing something that mattered. Most people who did things that mattered didn't know it at the time. That wasn't a comforting thought so much as an accurate one. And Cole had learned to prefer accuracy over comfort, in most cases, because comfort without accuracy was only useful for about as long as it took for the thing you'd been comfortable about to arrive. Jamie appeared at his elbow from the direction of the bleachers where he'd been sitting with his poster board. He'd brought the water cycle project to show Hailey, who had expressed genuine interest in a way that Jamie had not stopped mentioning for 2 weeks. "Are we done?" Jamie said. "Almost." "Bernard is teaching that man a card trick." Cole looked across the room. Bernard was in fact demonstrating what appeared to be a card trick to the administrator, who was following the instructions with the focused expression of someone who had not expected their Saturday to include this. "Bernard contains multitudes," Cole said. "What does that mean?" "It means he's more than one thing." Jamie considered this. "Most people are more than one thing. Most people are. Some people don't let it show." "You don't let it show. Not always." Cole looked at his son, at the dinosaur backpack that he'd finally agreed to replace in January and then changed his mind about and kept. At the serious face that was going to be, Cole could already see it, a face that asked hard questions for a long time. "I'm working on it," he said. "I know." Jamie slipped his hand into Cole's with the easy, unself-consciousness of a child who hasn't yet decided that this is something to feel complicated about. Hailey says you're getting better at it. Hailey talks about me? All the time. She thinks you don't know. Cole looked across the room to where Hailey was helping stack chairs with the efficiency of someone who had learned in the community sessions that the setup and teardown were as much a part of the thing as the thing itself. That you didn't get to only show up for the parts that felt significant. She was talking to someone while she worked, a teenager Cole didn't recognize, the new girl probably, and she was talking the way she talked when she forgot to monitor herself, with her hands moving and her face open, and Cole looked at her and thought about the girl who had memorized the least trafficked hallways and stopped going to the guidance counselor and learned to carry things alone, and understood that people could change, not into different people, but into more fully themselves, which was harder and more worthwhile. Brianna came to stand beside him. She'd been talking to the parent group coordinator who had given her 3 business cards and what appeared to be a standing invitation to every future event, which Brianna had accepted with the practiced grace of someone who fielded many requests and had learned to mean yes when she said it. She looked at the room, at Hailey stacking chairs, at Jamie pressed against Cole's side, at Bernard concluding his card trick to what appeared to be genuine applause from the administrator. "This is a good thing you built," she said. "We built. I showed up twice a month and failed at the pivot." "You built Hailey showing up," he said. "That's not nothing." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the gym windows, the April afternoon was going the particular gold of late spring afternoons, the kind of light that makes ordinary things look more significant than they are. Though Cole had come to believe that was less about the light making things look significant, and more about the light making it easier to see the significance that was already there. "Cole," Brianna said. "Yeah. I want to talk about what happens next, not right now." She gestured at the room, at Bernard and Jamie and the chairs being stacked. "But I want to, with you. What the next year looks like." He looked at her. "The next year. Or further than that. I'm not trying to put a timeline on it." She met his eyes directly, the way she always did, without softening the directness into something easier. "I just want to have the conversation." "I know," he said. "I want to have it too." "Okay? Okay?" They stood in the gym while it emptied around them, and it occurred to Cole, not for the first time, but with a particular clarity he hadn't had before, that he had spent the last 4 years becoming very good at managing his life in the way that a competent person manages a difficult project, efficiently, without waste, keeping everything functional and nothing more. He'd been good at it. He'd kept Jamie fed and loved and attended to. He'd kept the house standing and the work coming. He'd kept himself in all the ways that mattered practically. What he had not done, what he hadn't allowed himself, because allowing it required believing in the possibility of it, was let himself be part of something that wasn't entirely in his control. That was the thing you didn't train for. You could train every physical response, every situational read, every pattern of attention, and none of it prepared you for the particular vulnerability of standing in a room with people you loved and understanding that your skill set offered no protection for this, that the things worth having were precisely the things no amount of training could make safe. His wife had known this about him. She'd said it once, early on, in the plain way she said most things. "You can't out-prepare love, Cole. Eventually, you just have to show up and see what happens." He'd argued with her about it at the time. She'd been right, she usually was, about the things that mattered. He had Jamie because he'd stopped arguing and shown up. He had the community program because he'd stopped saying no to the coordinator and walked into the Maplewood Center on a Saturday morning and started talking. He had Brianna beside him in this gym right now because 11 months ago, he'd put down his cold coffee and moved towards something that scared him slightly, and trusted that his training would carry him until his judgment could catch up. It always had. That was, Cole thought, as close to a personal philosophy as he was ever going to get. Not be fearless, because fearlessness was a fiction, but let the fear exist and move anyway. Feel the cold clarity of a situation that matters, and let it sharpen you rather than freeze you. Show up to the things that ask something real of you, even the ones that don't offer a guaranteed outcome, especially those. They married in September, a small ceremony in the backyard of a house that was Brianna's legally, but had been shifting toward theirs in the practical ways. Jamie's drawings on the refrigerator, Cole's tools in the garage. Sunday pancakes that now happened in this kitchen, instead of the one on Dunmore Street, which Cole had sold in July, and felt about the selling the way he'd expected to feel, which was sad in the specific way of leaving something you finished, rather than sad in the way of losing something you still needed. The ceremony had 11 people in it. Brianna's company attorney Marcus, who cried more visibly than anyone else present. Patricia Oakes in her best blazer, which was the same blazer she'd worn to the first meeting with Reyes's team, and which she'd probably had since law school, in which Cole associated, now with someone showing up to do something difficult. Dwight, who attended in a pressed shirt and spent the entire reception talking to Bernard about construction, which was apparently an interest Bernard had developed sometime in the past year without mentioning it to anyone. Hailey, in a blue dress she'd chosen herself and argued for and won, standing near the garden with the particular self-possession she'd been growing into steadily since the autumn. Not confidence in the performed sense, but the quieter version, the kind that came from having been through something real and found yourself still standing at the end of it. And Jamie. Jamie had asked Cole 3 separate times in the week before the ceremony whether it was okay to call Brianna something other than her name, and Cole had said each time that it was entirely up to Jamie, and Jamie had thought about it with the seriousness he brought to most decisions. And on the morning of the ceremony, he'd told Cole he was going to wait and see what felt right in the moment, which was, Cole thought, possibly the most emotionally intelligent decision-making process he'd ever observed in a human being of any age. In the moment, the particular moment after the brief ceremony when Brianna crouched to Jamie's level in her dress on the grass and said something to him that Cole couldn't hear from where he was standing. Jamie said something back and then leaned forward and put his arms around her neck with the easy certainty of a child who has decided, and that was all. Cole watched this from 6 feet away. He didn't try to hear what they'd said. He didn't need to. Some things were private in the right way. Not secretive, not withheld, but simply belonging to the 2 people who'd shared them, and nobody else's to have. He thought about his wife, briefly, and without the customary tightening in his chest, not because he'd stopped missing her, but because he'd finally, slowly, stopped believing that missing her required refusing everything that came after. She had existed, and she had loved him, and Jamie carried her in the things he noticed, and the way he held himself when he was thinking hard, and the particular directness that had always seemed genetic, and probably was. She was not gone in the way that gone usually meant. She was in the backyard of this house on a September afternoon in the way that the people who formed you are always in whatever you've become. Hailey appeared at his elbow. She was doing the thing she did now, arriving quietly, no announcement, just present. She'd gotten good at that, or maybe she'd always been good at it, and had only recently stopped hiding it. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah." He looked at her. "You?" "Yeah." She looked at Jamie, still in Brianna's arms. "He's good, you know. He's going to be really good." "I know." "So is she." She paused. "So are you, when you let yourself be." Cole looked at his stepdaughter, at the girl who had memorized the safe hallways and learned to make herself small and drawn a picture of a man she didn't know because he'd shown up when she needed someone to show up, and who now stood in a backyard at a small ceremony in September, teaching herself to take up her rightful amount of space in the world. "Don't get philosophical on me," he said. "I'm 17, it's allowed." "Who told you that?" "Bernard." "I'm going to talk to Bernard." She smiled, the real one, unguarded and quick, and then walked back toward the table where Marcus was already organizing a second round of the food someone had brought, with the efficiency of a man who processed feelings by arranging things. Cole stood in the yard in the September light and let the moment be what it was, ordinary and specific and unrepeatable in the way that all moments were, even the ones that felt large. A small ceremony in a backyard. 11 people who had all, in their different ways, been in the same orbit of a Tuesday evening 11 months ago, and who had been changed by it in the small and significant ways that things change you when you let them. He had not planned any of this. He'd put down a thermos and walked across a gym and done the thing in front of him, and everything else had followed from that. Not smoothly, not without cost, not in the way of a story that knew it was going to work out. It had followed the way real things follow, haltingly, with setbacks, requiring more of him than he'd budgeted for, giving him more in return than he'd known to want. That was what nobody told you about the missions that actually mattered. not the ones with clear objectives and debrief protocols and a defined success condition. The ones with clear objectives were, in retrospect, the easier ones. You knew what you were doing, you did it, you came home. The missions that changed you were the ones you couldn't see the edges of from where you were standing. The ones that required you to move before you had the full picture and trust that your training and your judgment and the people beside you would carry you through the parts you couldn't see. He'd been trained for those too. He just hadn't known it yet, standing in the bleachers of a school gymnasium on a Tuesday evening in fall, holding a thermos of cold coffee he hadn't remembered to reheat, watching a basketball game he was only half paying attention to, waiting for nothing in particular. He'd thought that was a quiet life. He'd been wrong. The quiet hadn't been emptiness. It had been the pause before the thing that came next. Brianna came to stand beside him, Jamie running off toward Hailey across the yard, and she put her hand into his the way she did, without ceremony, without announcement, just there. And they stood together in the September afternoon watching the people they'd gathered around them live their ordinary, specific, unrepeatable lives. And Cole held on, and did not let go, and was not afraid.